Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? Thought it might be a good idea to come back around to the X-Men. As a guy who got into comics in the early 90s, Uncanny X-Men felt like the definitive comic of the 80s, where a bunch of shit happened in that decade, but really the X-Men was the stuff you needed to know about the most. And I thought it might be fun to jump in at the beginning of Marc Silvestri's X-Men career. So we're going to take a look at 1988's Uncanny X-Men 225. So just before we get into it, if you enjoy the channel, if you feel like you might want to help out a little bit, go over and subscribe on my Patreon. You get early access to everything I do, helps to support the channel, helps to buy new comics. So this is a fair bit further down the line from where we were last. Last issue of X-Men we checked out was number 201, so almost exactly 2 years before this. And I debated about when to jump back in. Part of the problem is that I don't really like the John Romita Jr. era. I took a look through a bunch of those comics. I'm not really a fan, I gotta say. There's little bits and pieces here and there that I would like to check out at some point. There's like the Life-Death issues, obviously. And there's the Mutant Massacre, which, again, I would love to do, but unfortunately that kind of kicks off with like the first appearance of Mr. Sinister, which I can't see a copy of for less than $85 on the internet. And I'm not spending that on any single comic. I don't give a shit what it is. And there's just kind of a lot of meh in between the end of Paul Smith and the beginning of Marc Silvestri. There's a lot of kind of casting about, kind of looking for a direction. So this seemed like a decent enough entry point. We had Marc Silvestri pretty much right around the beginning of his tenure. This issue is going to kick off the Outback era of the X-Men, that I believe lasts for like 40 issues or something. It's a while. And more importantly, this is an era of the X-Men I never read and always felt like I should. So it seems like a good one to focus on. So what has been going on in the X-Men, as far as I can tell? Storm is still without her powers, and she and Forge are trapped in some kind of pocket dimension in the Savage Land, I believe. The X-Men are searching for her, and they're also on the run from the government, because the whole deal with the fall of the mutants is the Mutant Registration Act, which had one of the most awesome ad campaigns I think I can remember, where they just put out these ads that look like newspaper clippings that say, "Do you know what your children are?" And in the fine print, they would be like, if you suspect that somebody you know is a mutant, or if you yourself are a mutant, please mail in your information too. And I assume it would go somewhere to like Marvel head office or something. And I remember seeing those ads and not knowing what they were for. Like I didn't make, at the time I didn't read X-Men, so I didn't make the connection. I don't even think you could get away with that these days. I think that would traumatize some fucking kids. But anyway, the X-Men have, of course, declined to register themselves to the government as mutants. So, once again, they're on the run from the government. And that's kind of where we kick things off here. So, we should start with the cover here. It's okay as a cover. It's interesting to see the beginning of Marc Silvestri's X-Men career, because we know that he spent a lot of time kind of honing his chops on things like Conan the King. He's done a whole bunch of fill-in issues all over the place. Friggin' Web of Spider-Man. He did an issue of Cloak and Dagger. He's done all sorts of stuff. And I read somewhere that he hates his early covers because he just didn't know what to put on them. I can kind of see it here. I mean, the shot isn't bad. For getting 8 people on a cover, that's pretty good. They all look like they're in physical space. And then that's kind of all there is. The rest is just this weird kind of energy signature thing that the colorist didn't really help out too much with. Because it all just kind of blurs together, this reddish brown with the orange up here. But yeah, I mean, like, it's okay. It's just interesting seeing it close up and being like, wow, there's nothing going on there. So we're going to open things up with an interesting splash. This is actually a sketch of the X-Men as drawn by Colossus. That is a fun one, and actually that would have been made for a pretty good cover if he'd ever put that on a book. He should have thought of that at some point. And of course serves as an effective introduce the team kind of page, because we've got pretty much everybody here, including the Juggernaut, who I believe is the last opponent that the X-Men have really faced in the issue here. This is like, that would be around issue 220, I'm not sure, 23, 24, something like that. And we're opening things up in Edinburgh. I'm not sure why. Well, actually, they do mention Muir Island in here. That's where the X-Men, I believe, are right now. So I think Colossus is just kind of mingling amongst the common folk and trying not to get hunted by, anti-mutant people. Nice single shot of the X-Men's last battle versus the Juggernaut. We get that gestural kind of line on everybody here that Marc Silvestri really kind of makes a signature of his style. And able to boil down a fight pretty well on a pretty small surface. I mean, like, this would have made it for a pretty good trading card, actually. And yeah, so Colossus is just hanging out on the street, and he's just, he's sketching his X-Men buddies. And a bunch of the neighborhood kids are hanging around to watch him. Because it's 1988. There's no internet. Might as well watch the big Russian dude draw shit. And Claremont's going to write some very stereotypical English kids in this, where they say things like, "Watcha," and "All you's a drawer then." And he explains that, I like to draw a little bit. I'm not very good. I'm only as good as whoever's drawing this particular issue. So, Marc Silvestri, that ain't too bad. And at this point, he's drawing the Juggernaut. I guess he's drawing pretty much this scene here. And the kids just start playing X-Men around him, which is kind of fun. And Colossus is kind of amused by just all the play going on around him here, where, one of the kids is playing the Juggernaut, and then all the other kids have to try and beat him, but, it's little kids' rules, so I smash everybody, and as long as you say that before everybody else says what they do, then you win, right? But the one girl here, she's playing Dazzler, and she zaps him right between his eyes with her whatever Dazzler does. She does light power stuff. I guess sure, she could have done that. And yeah, it just falls over, taken out. And it's like, yay, good guys win. And Colossus is like, wow, cool. Sometimes when they play X-Men, we're the good guys. That's kind of nice, actually. And they point out the fact that he's, he's kind of sweating like a pig here. And he mentions that he's recovering from an illness recently. The one thing I remember seeing from before this is there's a bit where he gets essentially fused into, like, stone. Now, I think that would have been about a year and a half before this, so that might be a little too far back. There might be something more recent he's dealing with, but I'm not for sure. So, anywho, there's a fun bit here where some of the kids are complaining, like, what's wrong with the X-Men these days? They're mostly girls now. Need to go getting more boys on the team, which I assume is a complaint that was heard fairly often around the time. And so Peter shows off, one of his drawings of one of the boys on the X-Men, which is Colossus. And, oh yeah, that Colossus guy, he's neat. And then you get some little shit show up who doesn't like X-Men, doesn't like mutants. And that's kind of the theme for Fall of the Mutants, right? And the kids are going to get into a fight over whether or not mutants are okay, basically. And Peter's like, wait, hold on, everybody. Let's have a rational explanation. Only, with a Russian accent. And that kind of scares off that one little shitheel kid. And yeah, so then all the kids kind of take off, except for this one girl who's, if you draw my picture, I'll tell your fortune. So he's like, okay, does that. And she knows way too much about him. Like, the kind of stuff she says is vague, seer type of stuff. But it is all very close to home, like pain of heart and spirit to match the wounds of the flesh, love's lost, honor found, a reverence for life tempered twice by the necessity of taking a life. And then at the end of it, Colossus is like, okay, that's enough. I think we're done here. Only the girl's gone. She's left like a chess piece of him as Colossus. And it turns out the sketch he drew isn't the girl who was just in front of him, but he still thinks, wait, that was the girl, wasn't it? And I believe this is Roma, who we will see again shortly. She's like a celestial being of some kind. And right after this meeting, that little shitheel kid comes back. He's got some firecrackers, and he's going to, show that Russian mutie lover what for and all that. Tosses the firecracker, which startles Colossus. And apparently Colossus' deal right now is that he's like metal by default at the moment, and he has to concentrate to stay human looking. So by startling him, he transforms into Colossus mode, which freaks out all the kids, including the one who thought, Colossus was pretty cool a second ago. And now he's got to figure out how the fuck to get back to Muir Island when he's stuck in his giant metal guy form. And there hasn't been a whole lot going on with the art so far. I mean, we just haven't had a good reason to draw something cool up until this point, essentially. There's been some fairly nice background stuff going on. It'll be interesting to see Silvestri's version of Colossus, actually. Because, I like the Paul Smith version, and, the John Byrne version's okay. Dave Cockrum, I'm not so big on. But Silvestri is a guy who's a little less formulaic, maybe, than guys like Paul Smith or John Byrne. He seems to rely a bit more on instinct. So from there, we're going to cut to an alternate dimension somewhere, or an adjacent dimension, that isn't really described. But I believe this is just Roma's home. And yeah, she's essentially like a god or a demigod. And this entity shows up. And this is a trickster entity. And at this point, he's taking the form of Naze, who's a shaman and medicine chief of the Cheyenne. I don't know why he would be doing that, but okay. Some fun visual stuff going on, at least. As Naze, like, teleports in, I guess, like, through the floor here. That's all right. That's interesting. And the trickster here has captured Roma and sucked her into, like, a game that you get the feeling they have to play fairly often, because it seems like they're opposing kind of deities. He's more of a chaos deity. She's, I guess, more order then. And they're going to play out some shit with the X-Men. And it's interesting to see Silvestri do just like this kind of plain panel-to-panel work. You know, I mean, the stuff I've seen most often of him recently is his Cyberforce stuff, where it's essentially all anchor images, or it's trying to be. So you don't get really any storytelling. It's like, no, he can totally do it. He just doesn't like it, I don't think. So from here, we're going to cut back to Scotland. And this is the remains of a pub that apparently the Juggernaut fight was near. It's basically all that's left is this fucking wall. But yeah, here's our shot of the X-Men. And yeah, no, it is like mostly girls here. The guys are Havoc and Wolverine and Longshot. And then Rogue, Dazzler, Storm, and Psylocke. And of course, it's a wanted sign. And we get our graffiti, the muties all die on it, which pisses off Colossus here. And he gets all existential about it, you know. Why are mutants so feared? We have done so many good. Again, interesting close-up on Colossus's face here. It feels like he doesn't quite have the texture down. There's elements there that I like, though. Like he's following the contours in an interesting way. It's a little bit obscured. Maybe a bit too messy, I'm not sure. And yeah, all of this is him just trying to revert back to his human form, because he's kind of sick of thinking about this shit. And he can't quite do it. He's too pent up. He can't reach whatever zen he needs to lose the outer shell here. Good expression on this close-up of him here, where he's, you know, like biting his lip and shit. That's some excellent looking stuff. And like this shot of him slumped down. Like, I tend to forget how good Silvestri is with gesture. This looks so smooth. Yeah, it's excellent looking stuff. And yeah, so not being able to turn back into a human, he's going to have to find a way to get back to Muir Island without attracting any attention, which of course is impossible in his current state. So one thing he can do is call up his sister Ilyana, back in the States, but you can do a collect call or something. The problem is that he's not, apparently this like upgraded form of his is stronger than he's used to. So he can't even like hit the buttons on the payphone here without smashing the panel. And so yeah, he's stuck just kind of like the receiver's still undamaged at least, but he's got to kind of fuck around with the wires to see if he can get some kind of connecting call and get the operator at least. And he is able to do that and get in touch with Ilyana here, who teleports in. And yeah, like 9-panel grid stuff too, eh? That's the kind of thing makes me wonder just how Marvel Method this is. Because as far as I understand it, Marvel Method isn't really about giving any kind of page layouts. It's more, this is what needs to happen in the issue. Maybe this is what needs to happen on the page. I mean, probably with somebody like Claremont, right? But I wouldn't think he would go, you know, we need this, we need this, we need this. But then again, I guess Marc is still pretty young here, kind of. Maybe he's just not confident enough to push the envelope. I don't know. But anyway, Magic, you know, she greets her big brother. And she's all effervescent and bubbly about this new mission that her and the New Mutants are going on. But she does stop talking long enough for Colossus to ask her to teleport him to wherever the X-Men are. So she's able to do that. And from there, we're going to cut to Dallas because that's where the X-Men are. And we're going to cut to Rogue here. And it's our first time seeing like an X-Man apart from Colossus. And it took till halfway in through the issue, too. And she's flying around Eagle Plaza, which is the place where Forge was staying, and Storm was staying with him when they disappeared. And Storm had no powers. So she flies back down, reports in to the rest of the X-Men. It looks like Wolverine is running the show, at least for this particular squad, which makes some sense. I mean, I guess he's the longest tenured X-Man at this particular point, anyway. So yeah, Rogue reports there's nobody home, but they gotta search the place out for Storm, so Wolverine's gonna go in first, and he's gonna do it by following her trail exactly, which leads through the front door. And of course, since this is Forge's home, it's going to be loaded with traps. Which Logan finds out as soon as he steps inside when a whole bunch of fucking lasers just kind of shoot him to ribbons here. Nice shot. And Longshot's just going to run straight in after him. And with his luck power, he's able to dodge out of the way of all of the lasers here, at least because he's just flying on instinct, and that's what works for him best. And Longshot can't move Wolverine fast enough, so he's starting to get pegged by the lasers here. So Havoc has to step in and just kind of level the room, which brings down the ceiling on them, but that was part of the plan. Rogue's able to fly in and scoop them both up and take them out. So when Rogue goes flying out, she bounces right off of Stonewall of Freedom Force. Tom Warzachowski having a little fun with some hand-drawn lettering here. And we get our classic Art Adams Wolverine shot, I guess. Not colored correctly, though. That's always interesting when you see that kind of thing. It's like, do they not know what colors Wolverine's costume should be? That's still, like, maybe the best Wolverine drawing that has ever been. And Stonewall isn't there by himself. He's there with his other X-Men villain rejects, Freedom Force. Honestly, Freedom Force has never felt like a decent threat of any kind. Whenever Freedom Force is being used, it's like, it's just because they haven't used Freedom Force in a while. And, the Blob's been an X-Men villain forever, and Mystique's kind of cool. And then the rest of them, well, I mean, at least there's a lot of them, right? But yeah, they're of course here because Freedom Force is a government-funded mutant team, so they're there at the behest of the government to rein in these outlaw mutants who refuse registration. So yeah, Blob comes in first. Avalanche, I think, is like doing a wave of rocks here and launches the Blob at Wolverine here, and we get to see the sight that Wolverine sees as Blob just lands on his face. That's kind of amazing, really. And I mean, he's too hurt to move, because he's just been cut to ribbons by the lasers. And I was just thinking, like, man, Marc Silvestri's not taking any chances in this book, is he? And then, and then we get this shit, and that's just kind of awesome. And yeah, we get our big standoff moment. Nice shot to get a whole bunch of characters in without it feeling cramped. That's always a little impressive to me. And of course, things are always weird between Rogue and Mystique when they're on opposite sides. And they're just going to kind of throw their ideologies around back and forth for a while, because this is a standing around page, so might as well fill it with conversation. And in the meantime, Psylocke is going to telepathically communicate with Dazzler here to let her know that on her signal, she's got to try and blind everybody so that they can make an escape. But of course, Destiny isn't telepathic, but she can see the future and can see that Dazzler's going to do that shit. And tells everybody to cover their eyes. Super Saber, who's like a speedster type. I don't know why he's called Super Saber. No, I refuse to look it up. Not for a character called Super Saber. Runs in and knocks out Dazzler. And the teams rush in to attack each other. Longshot goes up against Spiral. And I'm not sure what the relationship is between those two, other than they're both introduced in the Longshot miniseries. I know she's from Mojo World. They're both Art Adams creations, so there's like a familial link there. But she's trying to hide some kind of link from him, and he's kind of recognizing her. And they're not really delving into that, but they keep bringing it up a little bit. And Mystique tries to get Destiny to see the immediate future so that they can decide on courses of action on how to, just end this with the least amount of violence. But something's happening in the immediate future that is overpowering everything. So then we cut to Psylocke versus the Blob. And of course, Blob can't be moved once he's set himself. So Psylocke is trying to telepathically convince him that he wants to move, which is an interesting way to get around that, and something I can't believe hasn't been used before. Super Saber tries to come to the Blob's rescue to try and snag Psylocke here, but he wasn't actually coming after her. He was going after a telepathic illusion that she laid out for him. It's like, okay. So he ends up running straight into the Blob, bounces off him into Stonewall, who is another guy who's essentially invulnerable, right into Avalanche, who was incapacitating Havoc here. So pretty much managed to take out like two members by herself with one go, while she's trying to convince the Blob to stand up. And at that point, the Crimson Commando, I believe is his name, he sneaks up and karate chops Psylocke right in the neck here. Because he has a power that gets around the telepathy thing that doesn't seem to be worth going into. I'm not saying in the comic, I'm saying I don't want to go into it. And yeah, cut back to the Blob, who's still sitting on Wolverine, and then all of a sudden wishes he wasn't, as we get snicked. and goes flying up into the air. Just a little bit cartoony there. Great shot of Wolverine just kind of landing there and grinning. You don't see that too often. And right then, Colossus teleports in with Illyana as the Blob is landing. So before he can set himself again, and Colossus, as soon as he sees the Blob, knows he's got to punch. So punch! And great fucking shot. Again, that motion is just fantastic. So yeah, goes flying inside the building, and it looks like Wolverine has mostly healed now at this point. And then Storm presents herself and tries to tell everybody to stop fighting, which is a little suspicious. And Rogue zooms in and kind of knocks her out. Turns out that wasn't Storm at all. That was Mystique, of course. And Colossus kind of picks her up, and they're going to head inside the building because, that's where they were going in the first place. Saying we're coming up on some crucial moment in the time stream, and that whoever is in Eagle Plaza when dawn breaks will die. And then this gigantic hole in the sky opens up and all this light pours in. And that apparently is the thing that she's been dreading. So we'll see what that is in the next issue. Alright, so that's it for Uncanny X-Men 225. It's an okay issue. There's not a lot to it. It feels like what I'm sure it is, which is a setup issue in a trilogy, right? But there's a lot of these over the next little while, where there's like a 3 or 4 issue stretch, where we get a little bit of a reset, and then introduce the next problem, and then you spend the next 2 or 3 issues dealing with the problem. So yeah, not a whole lot in terms of story, or in terms of any kind of character progression or anything. The art was pretty good. Like, this is right around when Marc Silvestri's about as good as he's gonna get. And it must have been very interesting after a whole bunch of issues of John Romita Jr., and like Jackson Geiss is in there. There's a couple of Rick Leonardi issues. There's a bunch of house style guys. So after all of that, it must have felt like a little bit of a lottery win to land on a dude who can draw this well and this cool. And do it this fast too, because he does do most of the issues over the next 35. It's impressive stuff. So yeah, next time we'll check out 226. But that's going to do it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notifications so you know when the next one's coming out. Go over and subscribe on my Patreon. That'll give you access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff to the YouTube videos before they get uploaded to YouTube, as well as some Patreon exclusive content. You can also follow me on Twitter and DM me there for commissions, and you can go and join the Blood Force Discord server. But yeah, that'll do it. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.